When I was a kid, you went to school and you had to learn the 3 R's. So that was writing, reading, and arithmetic. And obviously, they didn't include spelling in that. But now, these guys at P21 have introduced the idea of the 4 C's: creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. How many people know what DBER is? It's discipline-based education research. People have been philosophizing and teaching, how to teach. I mean, how to maintain discipline, how to have a good lesson plan, how to fairly evaluate students. But discipline-based education research is, we'd like to teach you Newtonian mechanics, and we ought to acknowledge the fact that until Galileo and Newton, people designed pyramids and built the aqueducts in Rome, and they didn't understand motion at all. They didn't understand it right. And that's because it's very intuitive to think about motion, for example, as being motion. That is something moving. So we have to address misconceptions, and often we don't do that. And it wasn't until discipline-based education research came along and pointed out that students didn't understand conceptual knowledge very well, that this even became popular. So often to show trends, I'm an experimental physicist, and I sort of go on data. So I try to at data any way I can. So this is a curve here of the number of times in books up to 2008 this is a service available from Google. It's called Ngrams. The words education research appeared in books. And it went from 14 occurrences to 214. That's by 2008. And I'm sure it's a lot higher now. And I've listed some of the milestones along the road when Mickey Chi, one of my heroines, pointed out in 1981 that students are not little experts, just waiting for you to pull the facts into an expert framework that already exists. Students are novices, and they classify problems differently, they approach problems differently, they never bother to check their answer. There's 5 or 10 significant differences between students, between novices and experts, and we teach students as if they were little experts, which they're not. What to teach? And I think what's notable is the red line down the middle is power. So most stuff is power, right? But wider content, the teachers trashed this. They didn't want to teach more content. We all know we teach too much content. We, as one wise teacher said to me once, Vicky Weisskopf, a famous founder of quantum mechanics, he said, he was the department head, he'd call us assistant professors in there, and he said, when you're a teacher, you have a choice. You can cover a lot, or you can uncover a little. And we're too far on the covering a lot side, and we all know that. But the system makes us do it. We're not interested, as you can see, in teaching the relation of physics to everyday life. We want to teach you the grand principles and the abstract principles and have you work down from there, even if that's not how people learn. And finally, we think the most important thing is to make sense of the answer. Try to figure out if the answer is right, if it's reasonable, does it fit in with everything else? Do you know? Put it in with your accomplished knowledge. And so then I managed to get several friends of mine to ask students the same question, or the slightly rephrased question. And so here you see the students' responses, and what's important is to see them together, and then I'm going to block out that region in the middle where everyone is close to par and the error bars overlap. But so now, remember I said that the teachers thought they had too much content, wanted to teach less content. On the top there, where are the students? Their number one preference is for more content. Then the students hate labs, and we think they're okay. And our priority as teachers is making sense of the answer. Well, that's the second most trashed thing for the students. They didn't want to make sense of the answer. How the hell do you think they got into a selective college? It wasn't by being on the high-stakes test and getting this thing and saying, I don't know about that. Maybe I should do this little calculation on the side to see if I just got the right answer. While the clock is ticking, is that a wise strategy? Absolutely not. And finally, the students really want to know how this stuff relates to everyday life. And we want to teach, we don't want to touch that. The students want to go in this direction. And we're not just going orthogonal to them, we're going like 120 degrees. And then we worry that they don't seem interested and engaged. So students, you want to look at this and select what's most educational, and the professors, you want to explain to the students what's good before you hit them over the head with it. I think the students are right in some places. You're right. The labs as currently constructed, that's to say cookbook labs, not discovery labs, they don't really teach much. As one of my colleagues said, if you have to read a 10-page lab procedures write-up before you come to lab, how are you ever going to see that the lab is a clear confrontation of experiment with theory? You can't. It's 10 pages of gobbledygook between what happened when the ball rolled down the plane and your concept of energy. And the second thing is, yes, the students are right. You can't just learn abstract knowledge. You have to learn how to integrate it, constructive theories of education, how to construct it, integrate it into everything else you know, so that you, in the end of the day, you wind up being a wiser person. Of course, the teachers aren't wrong about everything. For instance, the teachers, you might say, look, don't just learn facts. They're all on the internet. You can learn about, the students want to learn about gyroscopes, relativity, quantum mechanics, and we're teaching them, 17th century old physics, right? But just learning about relativity, to really understand relativity, really understand quantum mechanics, it's a much more than just a one semester. You might begin to do it if you take the course for a semester and then are a TA in the course for the next semester. Then when you have to teach something, you really learn it. And another thing is, look, I think if I want to say one thing to you guys as a teacher, I would say communication skills and scientific argument and sense making. Get it right and convince the world that you've gotten it right. And so I want to contrast the problems that you're measured by, these 20-minute, half-hour problems that you can get done in that amount of time if you do them right because they're on the test, with a more real-life problem. The real-life problem is either you're supervising someone who is designing the bridge that your firm is bidding on building, or maybe the engineer who has spent the whole week with her computer program figuring out how big the bridge cable should be. And so let's just imagine you're the supervisor. And so this engineer comes in and she says, okay, so I figured out that the bridge cables ought to be 22 inches in diameter. And so, well, why do you think that, Sue? Well, because my computer program says that. I mean, are you going to stake the reputation of yourself and your firm on that everything was right in the program and that she used it absolutely correctly? I mean, you're a damn fool if you do, right? So you have to have some conversation. It has to go maybe something like this. The bridge we're building here is a lot like the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge, but it had 30-inch cables. And how come you think this bridge can work? It's got the same number of lanes, roughly the same aspect ratio, with 22-inch cables. I'm worried it's going to fall out. And then Sue had better talk about answer analysis. She'd better say something like, well, we're using a much lighter aggregate in the roadbed. Most of the weight of the bridge is in the roadbed, and so there's a factor of 40% less load due to the fact that we have a lighter aggregate in the thing. And the second thing is, that the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge was built in 1965, and we're using steel now that's 40%, 50% stronger. Now you put those two things together, and it's a factor of 2 less steel we're going to need. And so that's the square root of 2 times 30, and that would be 19 inches. So divided by the square root of 2. And so the 21 inches or 22 inches that I said, I think, really even allows a good safety margin. And that's the kind of discussion you have to have before you will sign off on this. So blended learning has, is really coming up. Even by 2008, it's probably equal, well, I don't know now, but it's certainly continued to grow, this idea of blended learning. And in fact, I would summarize the changes that I see coming as the lecture is getting replaced by peer instruction, and then to blended, then to flipped. So what these things all mean is that by the peer instruction is usually called clickers. I don't just drone on for an hour, I drone on for 10 or 12 minutes, and then I ask you some question, and I look at the responses, and given that the question is about right, which means about half people get it right, half people get it wrong, I say, why don't you turn to your seatmate and discuss this question? And the classroom that has been so quiet, suddenly, after about 30 seconds, it gets really noisy, and then about 2 minutes later, it begins to tail off. And so then I say, okay, so now let's see how whether you've changed your mind at all. Why don't you vote again? And usually you see a tremendous swing towards people getting the right answer, just by talking to themselves, not by getting any input from the professor. That's peer instruction. We're only teaching students to answer our examinations, to answer the questions we put on the exam. And that's why the students are always right before the exam clamoring for, oh, do you have a practice test? Okay? And I would just say that and I'm talking not to the teacher here, you must learn to learn, not just to get a good grade. At some point, you're going to be responsible for those bridge cables, and you had better have learned the stuff necessary to design those cables and figure out whether you got the answer right yourself. And I will get off my podium now, and I will ask you my next question. Okay, so these are data, and the data here are the number of accesses to an online textbook that was the core textbook course versus the day of the semester. So you have August, and you see those peaks, 3 peaks, little peak at the left. They're the weekly accesses, presumably in doing the homework. And well, I won't tell you what the rest is, but I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, how many examinations do you think there were in this course? That's right. The textbook is predominantly used as a review for the exams. When you interview the students, they say, well, I know that a topic on the test is going to be in the assigned reading. It's not fair if it's not in the assigned reading. We've already established this, that it's not fair for the teacher to ask you to think outside the box. And so you check over all that stuff, and then you know you've read that you're ready for the test. And you'll get a good grade whether or not you learn anything. In the future of education, what should you do? How can you learn better? How can you be more effective at what you want to do, or a better citizen of the world, or whatever? So the first thing to realize is that these days you don't have companies like railroads and General Motors that you go to work for and you have a lifelong relation with those companies. So that means you're going to have to change jobs, and that means you're going to have to learn all through your lifetime. And my son summarized it well, because he was doing really well at a company, and he was making equal to my salary at that time, including his bonus. But later on, he started making more than my salary without his bonus. He's working in Silicon Valley. And he says, Dad, he says, I don't have loyalty to my employer. I have loyalty to my resume. He said, 5 years from now, I like to work in startups. 5 years from now, this company is going to be broke, or it's going to be so big and so bureaucratic that I don't want to work here. So I have to go and convince somebody to pay me 70% more than a brand new MIT graduate. Why are they going to pay me 70% more? Because I have all this experience, all this varied experience, and some of it is really relevant to what they want to do. So I have loyalty to my resume. So that's the lesson for students. And so I was on a committee to talk about changing undergraduate physics and looking at the way it is and why maybe for 40 years. I mean, I've given a talk similar to this, and it's called How 10 Years of Physics Education Research Have Disabused My Notions Formed Through 40 Years of Teaching. And basically, we could do a lot better. But I'll just read this because I think it's rather poetic, even though I was not the committee member who wrote it. In spite of the numerous challenges facing undergraduate physics education, a realistic future includes introductory physics courses that students view as an opportunity to exercise their thinking rather than their memory, to learn approaches to solving problems that transfer to other science, technology, engineering, and math courses, to improve their expertise and attitudes towards learning science, and see the relevance of physics to their future lives and to the world around them. In this future, more students, especially women and minorities underrepresented in physics, will decide to major in physics and teach others about it.